discussion. As I mentioned, the topic is Information Overload in the 21st Century. Is Nano Learning the Solution? Kindly note, the panel discussion floor will be open for question-answer session later.
It gives me immense pleasure to introduce you to the panelists, starting off field of education. She holds a B.Ed and Master's degree in economics from Mumbai University, Society Pune, and Motivating Principal Award by Junior Red Cross Society, to name a few. With a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome on stage Ms. Seema Saini.
Sir.
The next panelist is Ms. Jyothis Mathew, Principal and Head of Schools, Treamis International School. Ms. Jyothis Mathew is a gifted teacher and mentor for school and college students as well as the faculty members. Ms. Mathew has been involved in managing various functions at Treamis, from admissions, student services and academics to administrations and operations. Before her venture into the K-12 space, she was involved in similar functions at college level. So let's have a round of applause for our next panelist, that is Ms. Jyothis Mathew, ladies and gentlemen.
Dr.Mrs.BGayethriDevi, Principal, Little Flower Public School, Bangalore, has over 25 years of academic and administrative experience in India and abroad in reputed schools, colleges and universities. She has worked in prestigious institutions like ABBAC and Huaik Kalampreet University at Bangkok, and has also worked as an inspector for the Ministry of Education in Sultanate of Oman. She is the convener for ICSE examinations in Bangalore South, the inspector of CISSE School, and secretary-treasurer for the Karnataka Association of ICSE Schools. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr.Mrs.BGayethriDevi, our next panelist on stage. We welcome you, ma'am.
So I request Ms. Seema Saini to kindly take the panel discussion forward.
Thank you so much. Very warm good morning, all of you. Great to be here at Bangalore and start off this session with a very interesting topic, something which is very relevant in today's times. We're talking of information overload, and we all know we have this little gadget in our hand, which just in time is there for all of us to resort to. Other than that, what are its implications on the 21st century? And definitely, how do you think we can find a solution to the impact that it creates? So, what I would interestingly like to share with you is that information overload metaphorically sounds like a flood which is drowning humanity in the huge data that is coming across, the kind of information that comes across. This has been, as World Economic Forum reports, that at the current rate of data creation, the world will produce 463 billion gigabytes of data in one day by 2025. That is huge. And how are we going to handle that information overload? What is the impact of that information overload, especially on the millenniums? And how is the generation handling it? Currently, of course, we hear professionals looking at it very positively because of the anytime, anywhere learning, because of the just-in-time learnings that are possible, small little capsules that they can resort to, and it has its huge benefits for the professional side. But how does the school get impacted by all of this? And I would essentially like to understand in the many ways in which technology has pervaded our lives. The big question is, how is the brain going to process this information, digitally or otherwise? And I'd like Mr. Andersen to share his thoughts on how do you think you would be able to grab the learner's attention if they're going to be so overwhelmed by everything that's out there?
First, I want to say that there is information overload, and it has a great impact on our brains. Most of us can feel it, even though we might still read. We can't read for so many hours as we used to. So there's something happening with our brains. But the other thing I want to talk about here is how should schools handle this challenge. And I think the solution, nano learning, is a solution that stays within the classroom instruction framework. And I think that framework cannot work in the digital world. We need to change the school day. We need to change both curriculum and pedagogy. Because I talked to some boys in my school the other day, and one of the boys said he had created a 3D model of an atom. And he told me he had spent 18 hours creating this model. So when we say that the attention span is smaller, yes, it's smaller if you keep teaching happening within the classroom structure, where the teacher is the active person. And then, of course, you need to create small bites of teaching if you stay within that framework, and that is nano learning. But I think that's a YouTube way of solving the problems for education. So I think there must be much more problem-based learning. There must be much more creation of things and apps and everything, so that children understand the life they live, the society they live in, the community they live in, identify problems and work in groups solving these problems and creating something that can help to solve a problem. If you engage children in activities like that, the attention span is without limit. So it's not that the new generations are hopeless and way beyond where we used to be when we went to school. They are just different, and therefore school must change. And if we do that, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic for the future.
So you very correctly mentioned it's important to be adaptable. That's, you need to adjust to the changes that are happening around you. So when we notice this information overload all around us, though you've mentioned the importance of conceptual learning, the importance of problem-solving skills for children, and the traditional form of learning cannot actually be done away with. But here, when we talk of the current situation of information overload, how do we adapt in the best possible manner to that? So what kind of practical solutions do you think we can find, Dr. Carvalho?
See, when it comes to nano learning, when it comes to schools, I think we need to focus more on children overall development. We do not want them to get addicted to gadgets alone, because nano learning will lead to personalized learning, and children will lose out on social relationships. And we do not want these things to happen at the school level. Maybe nano learning is, it's for the children who are at 11th and 12th and above. But when it comes to little children, I think we need to give them more in depth than the short capsules. It's okay once in a way to give it to them to be abreast with the latest technology that they have. But I think overall development of the children is very, very essential. And we need to give that, field touch kind of education to the children. And nanotechnology or the new education learning, it is like, you're giving, putting in 20% of effort and 80% of learning comes out. But when that application is given to the little children, I think it is little difficult, because little children need one-to-one attention. And the touch of a teacher or interaction with the teacher, that matters a lot when the kids are in the lower classes.
Very rightly put. That's absolutely important and necessary that that human touch is retained, and learning can be personalized with the human effect as well. But considering the situation that we are in, and considering how we handle and adapt to the current scenario, I think nano learning, we can definitely dwell on the pros and cons of it, but nano learning talks of those bite-sized learning that is possible, and micro-learning or nano-learning as you could look at it, though of course nano would be tinier than the micro-learning. But how can that be implemented in schools? How do you think we can engage with the attention span of, enhance the attention span of the children, and at the same time bring in this in schools? Yes, please.
Good morning, everybody. Before even I move into the topic, I always feel that all of you who are sitting there are very, very profound in the field of education, and you all are from the same age where some of us have used something known as kunji or guidebook. Now, can that kunji or guidebook actually replace the actual learning which a child goes through? I don't believe it can do. So nano learning can be in short span when you actually balance nano learning with the class learning, with the differentiated concept, it will work. Because you can't keep the technology away from the generation which is next. Generation Z does not understand anything without technology. So you have to balance it out, that how in a class I can have a detailed research, but at the same time I have a synopsis which can be of 2 minutes. Because there's a difference between micro learning and nano learning. Nano learning is exactly that you get things in short bullet points in 2-minute video. And you're still not missing out the depth of learning. But having said that, in-depth learning, thinking about, how to create knowledge, that is more important for the next generation. It's not about just learning and unlearning. It's about how do we move ahead in this field of knowledge, imbibing the technology but as a tool and not as a means to an end. So I somehow feel we have to balance it out, and I think that nano learning will be used. You cannot get away. As schools, we have to start adopting within our system, how do we balance? That is what I feel about it.
So good to hear the positive come from you as well. Initially, while we were talking, you thought that probably, school applications would find it difficult. Dr. Gayethri, if you could dwell a little on the benefits of nano learning that could be possible in school education.
For sure, yes. But before that, Ellirigu Namaskara, and all the guests who have traveled from across India, welcome to Namo Bengaluru. And the topic about nano learning, I think if we coin it with digital learning, we might not be able to reach out to the objectives. Nano learning minus the digital form, I think, has been prevailing in all our schools since ages. Take a simple example of dictation. All of us, even when we have gone to school, we have been a part of dictations across all subjects. So the word nano itself mentions that it is learning in bits and pieces. So when we are learning in bits and pieces, technology could be one of the instruments for nano learning, but we need not restrict nano learning only with technology. Today, all of us know, whether it's pre-COVID or post-COVID, the attention span of children in classes is limited. Though most of us have periods for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, I'm sure the concentration span of all the children is not 45 minutes, especially in the lower classes as well. So this is where, as teachers, we need to incorporate nano learning. It can be through varied forms. One could be dictation, the other could be using the art forms. It could be music. We know that there are schools which teach tables through music. It is also a part of nano learning. So I beg to differ, wherein we contribute nano learning to technology, or it's only in the digital form. It need not be in the digital form, or it must not be in the digital form. All that we need to understand is today's children, how, we call these children as millennial kids because they have been born beyond the year 2000, and technology comes, right from the time they are born. So we cannot separate technology from these millennial kids, but again, using technology for the learning could be, I would say, 25% of it could be through technology. The other 75% should be as teacher-student centric learning in a classroom. This is my objective about this whole topic.
You put out a beautiful thing that definitely attention span is very low. Research says that it is just 8 minutes.
Exactly.
The millennials today have an attention span of just 8 minutes. And if we have to capture the attention of the students in the classroom, can we have the same traditional methods of learning? Of course, you again suggested some very interesting points, that through music, through art, through various other activities, which Mr. Andersen as well put it across, those projects, you can have a lot of learning take place. But when we talk of the kind of information and how children multitask these days, so they could be listening to music, they could be reading a book, they could be doing some other work alongside. Is learning possible then? And with information overload, even in this context, multitasking is an important skill, they say, but sometimes it leads nowhere. So how can then we tap on the important aspects with a small attention span, with so much of information that the children are trying to grasp and absorb at the same time? How do we look at implementing or finding a solution to that? So couldn't nano learning be a solution by blending it? So what are your thoughts on that, Mrs. Mathew?
Good morning, everyone. So the irony is that on one side we have overdose of information, which leads to kind of less attention span. On the other side, we are trying to find out remedies on how to engage children productively. So the beauty of nano learning, or the charm of nano learning, is that the engaging strategies which are used by the content creators or the curators. So I completely agree with Ms. Gayethri Devi that it cannot be done completely digitally. Nano learning can be done by our teachers also in the class by designing a class which is completely engaging. Probably a teacher can start a session by introducing a topic. So nano learning can be used to augment the teaching learning experience, probably to introduce a topic or to encapsulate a topic or to summarize or condense a topic. So the appealing factor of this engaging children can be done in various ways, and if we are able to equip our teachers, facilitators, mentors to do that successfully, I think that nothing better than that to engage students in the class.
Absolutely. By blending it with technology in the classroom.
Exactly.
And encapsulating 2-minute or 3-minute bite size to sort of supplement what is being taught in the class, that can probably enhance learning in many ways.
Right.
What are the other domains, Dr. Andersen, Mr. Andersen, you think, where we can include nano learning as a solution to the information overload that is there?
Yeah, I totally agree that there's no quick fix to the challenges we have, and nano learning is absolutely one part of the solution, but only a small one. I think there are different approaches that are necessary for modern schools, and we cannot give up on extending the attention span, because also in the modern world there are complicated problems. Deep understanding, deep learning is more necessary than ever. How can we create the solutions against climate change without top-notch scientists who can understand things deeply and work on them for years? And so we shouldn't give up in school. School must be different. School is not YouTube. School is not video games. So we need to use technology, because that's how the world is, and we need to learn them how to use technology for learning. But school is something else. So we should also create environments where we focus on extending the attention span, where we force children to read, make them read a little more every day, make them dive deeper into a text. It sounds very traditional, but in the modern technological world, we also need to do that. We shouldn't give up. School must be different. Another aspect I think we should talk about is to handle information overload. You also need to work on the personalities of children. And I think India has old tradition for yoga, meditation, and let's call it mindfulness, because some parents in international schools don't like yoga. But I mean, that must be part of a school also, to get all this information out of your mind and make it possible for you to focus. And then I talked about problem-based learning and so on. So for me, the challenges for a modern school is a combination of very many efforts. And for me, it also makes it necessary to give up on the old school day with 45-minute intervals, because we can see now it doesn't match the attention span anyway. So what does it match? I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it was important what I said.
You definitely put light on, it is important that we learn how to increase the attention span.
Yeah.
There should be ways in which we can tackle this information overload in a manner which can be constructive to the lifestyle of children, or to, make it more productive, learning more productive, as well as enhance their learning experience.
Let me just add one thing.
Sure.
Because my eyesight is very bad. I can't read anymore. I've lost my ability to read. So I get all my information through sound. Audiobooks, electronic reading of newspapers, and so on. So there's nothing I can't do. I can write because I can hear when I make a spelling mistake. I'm mentioning it here because one way to force focus and concentration is actually listening. Because when you listen and need to understand what you listen to, you can't do anything else. So listening is a way of training the focus of the mind. I've felt it myself, because when I gave up, I couldn't read anymore, I had to learn to focus on sound. So I have had to relearn my habits. But I think that can be one tool in schools also, not to be afraid of technology when it comes to new ways of reading.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So we all can work towards enhancing the abilities of children to pay more attention and to absorb more and to learn better. But it definitely brings us back to one thought, that with this kind of a scenario that we are in, do you think learning would be substantial with what's going on with the millennials? The short, crisp learning material that is available to our children, would you think learning would be substantial, Mrs. Carvalho?
Definitely. These days children learn much more than what we teach in the classrooms. Because you said, there is a lot of overload of information. That is definitely there, but we must teach the children what to reach out to. Information is plenty, but let me take the one which is suitable for me, rather than wasting my time. So if you see in social media, so much of information comes, but we must teach the children and channelize them to the right information. So that will help them in turn to enhance their learning.
Mm-hmm. So do you see any futuristic trends in nano learning, and how do we implement that?
We need to understand that as facilitators, the environment, what Mr. Andersen said, that we have to bring some change in the learning environment. We have to take the challenge that, okay, my child is having an 8-minute attention span. How do I plan my lesson? How do I actually curate the learning in such a way that the learner finds deeper interest and actually goes into deep understanding? And when you go into deep understanding, the nano learning can help you to just, you can say, summarize few points, but it will not take away the deep learning. So I believe that we should continue with all our, determination to create an environment where teaching should be deeper, facilitation of environment should be such that children who are, more ably knowledgeable, they should be challenged. Those who are not understanding, they should be supported. And we have to bring different pedagogy and methodologies inside the classroom. Then nano learning is something which I would say is not just technology. And as Ms. Gayethri said, you have enough and more ways. Even we have done those when we learned. And those kind of concepts remain for life. What we need is keep telling our students, keep motivating them that there is a need to listen, definitely, and also to read. What is happening is they want to get the knowledge and get the marks. Let's get away from that mark business. Let's get deeper into understanding. That's what I feel nano learning can help us in that also.
So I think some very good discussion is happening here where we are looking at nano learning, not just as a technology-enabled bite-sized learning, but as something more that can be done to enhance the attention span of our children. So we can look at developing our curriculum in such a manner, or presenting our class plans being in a manner in which bite-sized learning or nano learning is made possible through multiple ways and helps the children do better, and that learning remains for life. We not only bring in learning for life, but we also ensure that children learn to become good learners through this and become lifelong learners. So just some parting thoughts on how do you see the future trend going forward in our classrooms, and how do you think we can make the best of what is available, the technology as well as the digital media and our traditional teaching methods that are there in class. So Mrs. Mathew, it would be nice to hear your thoughts.
Just to add on to one question which you referred earlier, see, one domain which has taken a lot of advantage of nano learning is the corporate sector. Corporate sector employees usually use nano learning as a very effective or successfully proven method to update themselves or to upskill themselves. So probably lot of information or information overdose might lead to mental fatigue and physical fatigue, in fact, and they might forget what they learned quickly, or the learning outcomes may not be expected. Right. So corporate sector is one sector which has taken a lot of advantage of nano learning. So anywhere where people would like to multitask and probably take advantage of the time management challenges that they face, I think nano learning is the future. But when it comes to school, I feel that it is the teachers who makes the change. It is us, the educators, who are capable of making the change. Of course, nano learning can be used as a learning tool, provided it is tailored professionally by professionals. We are living in an era where, you know, the success of a small 2-minute video is decided by the number of views or probably the number of likes. But other than that, if we are able to work on the quality, to validate the quality of the videos which we create as a part of nano learning, I think that makes a lot of sense to our children. Not to forget the fact that a major part of our population still do not have access or luxury to Wi-Fi and a gadget. So if we focus more on nano learning, I think that will also lead to a gap, learning gap or disparity in the knowledge that children acquire. If they have access or luxury to afford a gadget and Wi-Fi, probably, you know, the learning or acquisition of knowledge would be more compared to the ones who don't have or who cannot afford to do that. And one point which I would like to add on is we are all trying to address nano learning as a solution for the reduced attention span. And as you rightly mentioned, it has come down to 8 minutes. What if it further reduces? Are we going to break it beyond nano? So that is also one more thought probably which I would like to leave you with. What if the attention span further reduces below 8 minutes? How are we going to tackle that situation, or how are we going to take our children through that challenging situation?
I think Mr. Andersen put it beautifully, that we need to work on improving the attention span. So whether it is meditation or whether it is mindfulness and, you know, activities which will enhance the concentration power of children. And probably we'll be able to tackle that 8-minute thing. We can only be more optimistic about it. But definitely one thing that you just said about social media being such an important and integral part of the lives of the younger generation, especially the millennials, they cannot survive without that. Why can't we combine the two and ensure that learning happens in real time, just when the student needs it or just when a learner requires, it is available for him to resort to I look at that as a future trend that could come in current scenario where you're combining technology, the social media, the learner and the habits of the learner or the personality of the learner. That's how I put it together. Dr. Gayethri, how would you like to look at this as a futuristic trend?
Ms. Seema, it's a very important point for all of us to ponder. I think when we all went to school, it was more of a chalk and talk method of learning. Today we don't find that in many schools. So let's also understand our country where we have schools which are in the metropolitan cities, we have them in cities, in 2-tier, 3-tier cities and villages, smaller towns, and to implement nano learning through technology would be a Herculean task. But having said that, let's also understand that lesson planning is an art. When there are about 40 plus children in a classroom, not all their intellectual levels would be at par. That is why we talk about MI, multiple intelligences. Our speakers today also spoke about, listening is one of the important tools of learning. I think most schools here also follow this practice of LSRW. And in the same order, L standing for listening, S standing for speaking, R standing for reading, and W standing for writing. Writing comes in the last order. So the more you listen, Ms. Seema mentioned how can we blend social media. Social media is all about listening and seeing. And also, some of us are over here are affiliated to the CISCE board, and an integral part of learning in the CISCE board, especially for languages, is oral skills. Most of us would be following. It's nothing new to all of us.
Absolutely.
So AURAL and ORAL. AURAL is all about listening and ORAL is all about speaking. So these come in tiny bits and pieces. So I think once we take all these techniques in mind, first train our teachers to implement nano teaching in class, then comes the nano learning, and very, very important is what we are forgetting here is assessment. The assessment also need not be, we're so used to listening half-yearly portion, annual portion, reading the entire textbook and coming prepared for the examination. Let's all understand that when we give a testing to a child with nano reading material to learn, the outcome is fantabulous. But the same child, when the portions are more, somewhere the child fails to live up to the so-called expectations of marks and ranks. So even as a testing tool, nano testing has to be implemented to ensure that a child reads, learns little bit of the curriculum, but that learning is everlasting. It's a learning for life. And more than the children over here, I think our teachers need to be trained, motivated, and empowered to use nano learning as the future trend in education.
And I think it will help the teachers a lot as well.
Exactly.
So nano assessment, as you said, immediately after you teach, and there is a quick little assessment, and there's a diagnostic assessment happening for the teacher to understand how the teaching needs to be tweaked or handled in the class to ensure that everybody's got the concept. So definitely that's one interesting point that came across. And we, all of us, seem to agree to certain things, importance of nano learning as well as application of nano learning. And at the same time, we also understand, being human species that we are, most adaptable species. We have to adapt to the current scenario and to encapsulate all of that in our school systems or in the education process so that learners become better learners with the kind of scenario that they live in today. So thank you so much for all your thoughts, and it was a pleasure to conduct this with you all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for our panelists here on stage. May I request Mr. Anil Sharma and Mr. Saji Thomas, MD in TAB, to felicitate our speakers. Can we have a big round of applause for all our panelists here?
I would request the dignitaries to kindly be on stage with us as we have a few awards to be given away to the panelists. So we will be shortly announcing